I've been asked to give a talk at the Affordable Art Fair next week, and they asked me to suggest an informative and funny talk, which is why it's not just so. Yeah, so I gave them animals in art; they didn't think that was funny, and I gave them nudity; they didn't think that was funny. But when I said artists, when I said self-portraits and the artist's ego, they thought that was funny enough. So this is the little pre-run. So you're all welcome to give me feedback at the end on how I do. Hopefully it will last less than half an hour, and I'll talk really quickly.
Yeah,
not too quickly. Not too quickly. But we'll whisk through a lot of the images. There are obviously an amazing amount of self-portraits in the history of art, and I've tried not to do it chronologically because that would be dull, but more by kind of topic and theme. So this is not a self-portrait. I don't actually have the self-portrait, but it is by, it's one of Phidias's sculptures, which is on the Parthenon, and Plutarch in his Life of Pericles wrote about Phidias, who did the sculptures, saying that the reputation of his works nevertheless brought a burden of jealous hatred upon Phidias, and especially the fact that when he walked the battle of the Amazons on the shield of the goddess, he carved out a figure that suggested himself as a bald man, old man, lifting on high a stone with both hands. So back then, it was sort of so shocking and such artistic hubris that he basically lost his reputation, no one liked him anymore, and he didn't survive as a sculptor, he didn't survive as an artist. Life hasn't continued like that in the 20th century, as we all know, because many artists' whole exhibitions and whole life work is just about self-portraiture. So in the next slide, this is medieval art to illuminated manuscripts before, huge oil paintings. But here this is by Father Phidias, and he has, in one of the letters R's, he's put himself in the name, that's him painting. He's holding a marl stick, he's painting the letter, everything's very exquisite, but he's really saying, I am the centre of the art and the painting, and it's all about me, whilst it's amongst the illustrated manuscripts. And then most illustrated manuscripts will have the artist will have put his little character or his little face painting in the margins or in the letters, and so they were discovering themselves, but the likeness wasn't necessarily a true likeness, apart from Phidias was a joke name because of his red hair, and so that's part of the pun. He has given himself that part of the likeness. The next slide. This is Dürer at the age of 13, silver point etching, silver point drawing, and he's just displaying his great skill and observation and life skills, his own self-portrait. He did many self-portraits in his lifetime. This one's rather tender. So then we go to, obviously, the wisest man on the planet, Leonardo, one of his self-portraits, and he was very much. There's the amazing exhibition of Encounters at the moment says how you must always look at nature, and people always adorn themselves with all these clothing, and yet we can see people just from their face in their portrait. Nothing else is needed, just the portrait. So he's drawn himself as a very wide, lovely man. So when in portraiture, the mirror became a thing in the Renaissance. The first time artists started using the polished mirror, it became available in people's homes. But it's also when portraiture, self-portraiture, as we know in oil painting, really first came about. And this one is by Parmigianino. It's a really phenomenal painting. When he was only 21 years old, he would have had a little bit more beard, but it was kind of the idea of the genius artist, how young he was, and he was born that incredible. And not only was he using a convex mirror, but he painted the painting isn't on a flat wooden panel, it's also the panel itself is convex, and that's his left hand, which wasn't his artist's hand, but in those days it was thought of as all pure hand because it wasn't really used that much. So he's kind of putting himself forward as, I'm such a pure and amazing artist, and you could really employ me. Unfortunately, he wasn't. The Pope didn't think he was that amazing. He did get jobs after when he got lots of work, but not through the Pope. And then there's even done the ceiling and the window. It's all beautifully done. And on the right, there's his canvas and his easel. This is by Van Eyck, and it's a portrait of a couple who are married, Italian couple. She's not pregnant, it's just the way they wore their dress to show their kind of opulence. But in the mirror is a little self-portrait of Van Eyck with another character, and he's saying how, I am the artist, but I'm so small and insignificant compared to the art and God and the world. And he's just displaying all his skills at the furs and the different textures and the setting and the architecture at the top and the windows. So it's all the skills, and yet I'm in there. And rather than being signed on the bottom right, is signed just above Van Eyck was here, which he's done a little pun in Van Eyck, as I am the eye, above the mirror as well. So the next one. This is Narcissus by Caravaggio. It's not a self-portrait, but it's about the self-obsession and the love and the story of Narcissus looking at himself and being so caught by his own beauty that he nearly drowned. He spent his life just staring at what the beautiful figure was. So this is more a cautionary tale about the artist being all about the eye and the self. So most artists about trying to, kind of in the history of art, there's a lot in this century and in the 20th century which is all about the I and the me. But in Renaissance times it's much more about how finding who God is inside you, and that makes you a greater artist and you're going beyond yourself. So this is one of Caravaggio's cautionary tales. And then you'll see his this is from 1597, and I'll show you some other ones of his later on. So he did do a lot of self-portraits, but not necessarily in a good light. So first of all, we have group portraits next, where the artists weren't necessarily just doing isolated self-portraits, but they managed to, as that would be too kind of narcissistic, to put yourself just about you, they instead just managed to slip themselves into subject matters like the adoration of the Magi, which is probably in some people's minds a little bit more egotistical than just doing a self-portrait. So Botticelli is here on the right, and it's with the Medici family all around him, adoring the infant baby. So you can see he's looking out to the right. And actually most of these group portraits, they're on the right, I don't know whether that's significant at all. Vasari described it as the beauty of the heads in this scene is indescribable. The attitudes all different, some full face, some in profile, some three-quarters, some bent down in various other ways, while the expression of the attendants, both young and old, are greatly varied, displaying the artist's perfect mastery of his profession. Sandro further clearly shows the distinction between the suits of each of the kings. It is a marvellous work in colour design and composition. So Vasari is basically saying what the artist's purpose was, is that Botticelli painting this, he's also saying, look how skilled I am, I can do every single profile. So he didn't need to just do his head, he's putting himself and self-portrait in a context of every different position he can do. Raphael is incredibly famous painting, and one of his most famous, the School of Athens, set in the correct context. And there are lots of famous characters in the scene. He is in the right, and he has painted himself as Apelles, who was, so his self-portraits him as Apelles, who is one of the most renowned ancient Greek painters. And there are lots of paintings in this art of Apelles' painting, but none of Apelles' paintings actually survive, but he is quoted in Plato a lot. He's put Michelangelo as Heracles at the front. That's the self-portrait of, not self-portrait, portrait of Michelangelo at the front. And Heracles was a real loner. He was known as the philosopher of the obscure and the tearful philosopher because he was such a loner. So that's definitely Raphael making a statement of him. And he's painted Leonardo, who's on the left in the middle, as Plato. So he's really saying, Leonardo is a great philosopher and thinker, but he's put himself as the painter, which I think is very evident what he thinks of himself. He was a very popular family affair. So Vermeer in 1666 paints himself, but this is an amazing self-portrait because obviously it's about him just as the artist, and I am the painter, my face is irrelevant. but look at all the skills I can do. He's in the process of painting, so the kind of feathered hat is on his canvas, and it shows all the skills with perspective and line. It was known as the art of painting for a long time, and then it was considered to be a self-portrait. But it is obviously a self-portrait, and the clothing is much more refined than you would necessarily be wearing every day to paint. But he's showing how skilled he is and how wealthy he is becoming in his paint. That's me, yes. So this is the famous portrait by Laszlo. The far left corner and the top are stitched on afterwards. So he used to get bits of linen and then he's stretched it and made it larger. So he was he in the first composition or not? It's a kind of huge art historical debate. Did he decide to kind of put himself into the picture as well as Philip and his wife in the mirror? So there's a huge debate about him as the artist, and obviously he's whether it was in the original idea and composition, or whether it was an afterthought, or whether it was even an invitation to be part of the painting. This is by Mecca, who is the man in white, and it's an homage to Delacroix, who is in the portrait. And I've got a self-portrait of Delacroix, which is very, very similar later on. Delacroix was a master painter and a master thinker, and wrote lots of treatises. He also said this quote, which I've been quoting to everybody this week. The eyes of many are dull or false. They see objects literally. Of the exquisite, they see nothing. So he was really held up by the school of realism and going against kind of romantic and the strict classical ideals. And there's Manet is the man standing up with his hand in the pocket. Whistler is the character in the front. And Baudelaire, who wrote a lot about art and writing, was one of his great friends and was heartbroken when he died. And this piece was done just a year afterwards, is the one on the right. And actually, when it was produced, the critics were really rude about it and damning about it, which only made this group of artists persevere in their resolve to hate the contemporary art ideas. So the next group of portraits, this is more about artists. So this is always artists putting themselves in a group and how they define themselves within the group. And this is more about artists just as themselves, whether they were using their self-portraits to display skills or their artistry, and then we'll see it changing slightly as we go along. So this is of Van Eyck, who did the Armand Folly portrait. For a long time it wasn't really known that it was Van Eyck, and it's the first self-portrait in oil, standalone, no kind of other, with no symbolism to it. Not trying to put yourself into a group portrait, no justification, just a portrait for itself. And the next one is, this is Ghiberti, who wrote lots of treatises on art and also an autobiography, who was at the same time as Alberti, who also wrote lots of treatises. And Vasari was very damning about him because, this is on the baptistry doors in Florence. Vasari was very damning about him because in his treatise he basically just spoke about his art and his life using the word I. And whereas they didn't use the I in their autobiographies. They said the artist did this. So Vasari was very damning about him for doing that. And his visions of art was, Ghiberti's visions of art said that if you could be an artist, you had to understand grammar, geometry, philosophy, medicine, anatomy. There was another long list, but I got bored of writing the rest of them. But anyway, he expected a lot more from his students. And actually, even Vasari said it was a bit pedantic and over the top. This is Titian, self-portrait. Titian and his contemporaries, there's a lot of talk about how they were kind of obsessed with themselves getting older and how that changed them as an artist and as a person. And there's a lot of talk about this kind of referencing back to Michelangelo and the kind of the bulk of his form, but also how Titian apparently was, I love Titian as a painter, but apparently he was really naughty. He would always go and tell all his patrons, like, seriously, I'm getting really, really old, and if you
might be commission me now, it might be your last chance because I might be dead next year. And he lived till, I think, about 90, didn't he? He won that trip out about 30 years. And this is when he's about 70 years old, and showing kind of just him as a kind of a grand artist, but very simplistic, very much, you know, I am still poor. I don't have anything on my walls or any adornments. I am just who I am. So commission, please. Let me go on to Caravaggio. Caravaggio has done lots of self-portraits, and he's slightly different because even though he's in this one, he's obviously painted himself as Bacchus, but he's not painted himself as, you know, the artist so commissioned me. He's saying, you know, but also I can, you know, think allegorically. I can paint a beautiful still life. I can paint exquisite grass. I can do flesh. So really, you should think about commissioning me to do my art. But then he kind of started realising that he really wasn't such a pleasant human being, and he started satirising himself a little bit, if we go to the next one. And then Rembrandt did lots and lots of portraits of himself. This is in Kenwood House, and lots of people get very excited about the two circles, and whether it's symbolism of East and West, or the globe, or I think now the current thought is that it's probably showing his artistic skill. So there's a story of Giotto wanting to get a commission, and he goes to the Pope, and the Pope says, well, how do I know that you're a great artist? And he draws a perfect circle on the floor, and so the Pope gives him the job, and he would have known this story, and but the circles aren't perfect, and with the closer analysts, they're not drawn with one line. So it also could just be a really beautiful, it's probably a kind of an idea, but more part of the design and the way he wrought his palette, but it's more just about composition than it is any kind of deep philosophy. This isn't a self-portrait, this is him using himself as the model. So artists often use themselves as the model because they're cheap, they don't complain, they never make any demands, they don't mind about room being too cold, they'll sit there for hours. So that behind is his wife Saskia, and it's him as the prodigal son, and he uses his portrait the whole time. So many of his images he's got himself in there. So this is him as the prodigal son in a tavern, and here he is as St. Paul, the apostle. And this thing, people have said that Paul's always portrayed with a beard, and originally artists always would say, well, either there were any beard, and then that's why he had to use himself. But actually, of course, in Antwerp and Amsterdam at the time, there were being a lot of bearded characters around. So it's definitely more a decision to state that Paul wasn't necessarily like that, and he was a young artist, and what he did and how he told the stories, and also equating himself to Paul, saying, I have also spent my whole life being a good man and painting religious scenes to explain the Bible stories. It's a very beautiful head. Those ones were all in the exhibition Rembrandt by himself, it was at the National Portrait Gallery. National Gallery. This is him, this is an etching, and it's just trying expressions. It's called Wide-Eyed Man. I don't think he called it that. But it's him, you know, trying different expressions, and really he is, I think, of all artists, in history of art, the one who used his face the most as a model, and to try and experiment and to draw, rather than without a narcissistic reason to doing it, unlike in 20th century artists. It was more kind of self-analysis. This is him as a beggar. So he's also got a great face to draw. And the next one is, this is Van Dyck. This is the young Van Dyck, showing his how beautiful he was and how skilled he was, and he did do incredibly well as a portrait painter. But he worked in Rubens' studio, and Rubens soon realised that he was being outflanked by Van Dyck, and he came to England and became the favourite artist of Charles I. And in the next painting, Charles I gave him an honour, and that's what he's holding in his hand, the gold chain is the big honour, and he's pointing to the sunflower, and they're both looking at the viewer and saying, you know, how enlightened and amazing I am as a painter and an artist, and beautiful like a sunflower. Next one. This is Hogarth. Hogarth's amazing painter and also writer, and wrote on. So there he is with his favourite dog. This is a traditional pug. This is an English pug. So the pugs you see hanging around London at the moment are Chinese pugs. They're not the proper ones. This is the proper one, the properly proportioned pug, whom he loved. And his palette, which has the S line of beauty, which is Hogarth's line of beauty, which he talks about in his thesis as well. This is that you really can't hide who you are as an artist, even doing a self-portrait. I think this is probably the most boring self-portrait in this collection, and it's by Poussin, who I think is quite dull as well. And I think it's, I think there's nothing really to say about it, isn't it? He's got a tiny paintbrush. He's holding it too far down, and it's quite tightly rendered. There's probably a print at the top, which I don't know what it says. I didn't think too much, but I thought I should put something that I don't like them. So the next one this is Chardin, who I love. He's an amazing still life painter and did incredibly well. But in his later years, he kind of got bored of just doing still lives and decided to paint himself, and also not to paint, but to use pastels and think like, why do I always just have to be commissioned and be bought for my still life? I want to be something else. So he turned to a different medium and also just painting himself. So he's wearing, what the Americans call a visor, to shade his eyes. But it's really a very exquisite and well-drawn portrait. So he's basically saying, you've commissioned me to paint pots and pans in my life, and I was actually really good at portraits. But he's just enjoying himself in his old age, just sitting in the studio painting himself. And there's loads and loads of rising paint, pastel paintings of him as well. The next, this is Delacroix, and I just thought I should include him because he's an amazing man. This was long before he died. This was 30 years before he died. Perhaps I should put a photo with this one. Okay, looking at you all. What does he say? He's trying to again. Delacroix, the eyes of many people are dull or forced. They see objects literally, of the exquisite they see nothing. There he is looking at you. The next one. So this is artists who did whole series of of self-portraits. So in Rembrandt did a whole load of it, so Caravaggio, artists always did a whole load of it. In the 19th century, and then definitely in the 20th century, even more, artists kind of created their whole oeuvre was just about the self-portrait. But Courbet, who when you study him, you kind of grow to love him and his character. He was completely quirky and fun, and he's kind of shown his skill here. This is the artist's studio from 1854, and he's basically doing one of his beautiful landscapes. On the back wall, he did have lots of blockers in his paintings, so he decided to take them out, and he showed the difference between on the right, the classical, the people who critique and look, and the classical mood, as opposed to people who look at naturalism. So he was all about naturalism, looking at art, and all the scruffy dressed characters on the left, people in the straw hats. So he's kind of the difference, but also showing his skill and his scale. And it wasn't well received.
Is it called a self-portrait?
It's called The Artist in His Studio, or Legume Paintings, lots of photos. But it is, yes, self-portrait. The next one is called Despicable or something, this one. Something like that. And this is another one of his kind of touch on realism and much harsher painting and harsher lighting. I would probably say the whites of the eyes are a little bit too white. The next one is Bonjour, Monsieur Courbet. And Courbet is on the right. He's got all his painting gear, and that's all he needs for life. He's got his hat, he's dressed for the road, he's going off to paint, and he meets this gentleman who needs a support even for that. So that's his little swipe at the bourgeoisie, rather than him getting into his high art. We're moving very swiftly, we moved into the 20th century. So Munch has had, the reason why I put him there, and Munch, I really got this portrait of Munch. But Munch and Gauguin and Rembrandt have had whole exhibitions just on their self-portraits. And before you just had exhibitions, now you have exhibitions. It always starts with the first painting is of the self-portrait. So Munch, this is Munch in Hell. Moving into the 20th century, this is 1903, it gets much more about the artist and his torment and his life, and it's irrelevant what the client culture is thinking or doing. It's really just about themselves. This one is a beautiful portrait when the artist was still quite young. Does anyone know who it's by? So you can shout out, because I'm going to show a whole load of, and what's great is him, like in his self-portraits, you see his artistic career, how it changed and developed. So shout out when you know. Next one. Yeah, Picasso, yeah. So this is Picasso in 1901, and this is him, so there he is. It's beautiful, isn't it? So tender and amazing, and lots of thought. And then I think this is still amazing, but much more about design and about colour. He's getting a bit wacky. Humorism, he gets wacky, I don't worry. But he's just making money, but someone's buying it, basically. And there were so many more of Picasso. You could have had 100 slides of just Picasso's self-portraits. And the same with Van Gogh, who besides, is when artists paint themselves in a guise of someone else. So this is a portrait by Giorgione of David, as in David and Goliath. And David was very famously a lover of women and a lover of music. And Giorgione also thought of himself as both that exquisite musician and painter, and also amazing with the women. Well, this is Michelangelo. So the Caravaggio is influenced by the Michelangelo. If we go for a close-up of the Michelangelo, this is Saint Bartholomew, who was famously flayed, which is one of the martyrdom techniques. And the flayed figure doesn't have the head of Bartholomew, it has the head of Michelangelo in it, because Michelangelo is saying even if he was flayed, he wouldn't be him, it's someone that was as awful he would end up being the flayed person. So that's the same pose as Caravaggio's in as well. And this is one of Goya. Goya did many self-portraits, but this one is of his doctor, who begins with a G as well, who's in it, I can't remember. But the doctor who saved him near the end of his life, he looked after him. So there's kind of all the heads of the kind of the deads and the devils behind, who are there trying to take him, but the doctor in the end intervened and saved his life. So he's clinging on not to his paints or his or his palette, but to a bed sheet saying that thank God for the doctor, after all my ego and everything. So the next one. This is Edward Lear drawn by himself. He's a great. I asked Jamie to put an Edward Lear in. He put this one in. I actually wanted to do a different one, but then when I read the quote, it was. Lear showing a doubting stranger his name and his hat to prove that Edward Lear was a man and not merely a name, which is great about self-portraits. And he's very good at mocking himself. This is actually probably the most real self-portrait of himself, which is ironic. And then the next one was by Lear. There's him, the little bird. This is Toulouse-Lautrec, who often carried himself as well, and made himself out to be he had great insecurities about his height and his kind of ill health in his legs. So he was always doing little cartoons of himself. Actually, when painters first, in the Renaissance courts, the first thing that painters did was always do little caricatures of them. Caricatures first started as self-portraits of being themselves. So this is Lotus Corinth, who's done lots of self-portraits. This is the dilemma of so women were becoming more and more legitimate in having a painting career. Even more women were being allowed to train. And this is a kind of comment on, what this is actually his wife, but she started off as his figure model, and I think there was 20 years difference. And the dilemmas, because she's the lust and the love he has for her is blocking him from painting. The dangers of falling in love is that you might stop your art, and the break it has. So that's current. Bacon, lots of self-analysis. And this is Freud, who, this is self-analysis, but this is actually really satisfying. He was punched by he had an altercation with a black cab driver in London who gave him a black eye, so he went to his studio, and his form of revenge wasn't calling the police, it was doing self-portrait, which must be really cathartic, but also especially as it sold for £2 million. A little while later, it would have made it even better. So this is, what we all love, to be able to treat ourselves in moment of revenge. Using your own end. The next set, I think, are women painters. So, this is Artemisia Gentileschi painting herself as the allegory of painting, and saying how painting shouldn't demean women, actually empowers them, because it's such a, art and painting is thought of as such a high form of art beyond medicine or physics or geometry or anything, and actually women were the allegory of painting. It was never a man. So she's basically saying, if I put myself as a self-portrait, that's how empowered I am. The next one is Angelica Kaufman doing the same thing. So as a woman, you were allowed to be a musician, and music was thought of as a secondary art, and it could be safe. It was at the home. It was very cosy. Whilst painting over there, she's being pulled between music and art is really for the higher gods. She's pointing, art is pointing over there in the corner and saying, but really should come with me. She's hesitating between which one. We all know which one won, so that's good. With her limited palette as well. And this is this is really lovely, Gilles Lebrun, about saying that your greatest creativity is your children, is your for however skilled you are at painting and at art, you can't be more creative, and men can't have a child. They might do the next century, but not just yet. This is Corinth again, the guy who was standing with his wife, and this is him talking about the frailty of art, and at the end of the day we are all just going to be bones. So what are we all doing it for in our study and quest for art and painting? But there's this looming character that is in us, sitting beside us the whole time. So there's Corinth being even more self-analytical. Here's Sheila, who's being a little bit self-analytical, and there are lots that are much more explicit and grotesque than this, and there's a lot of conversation actually in painting about how kind of the turmoil of teenage boys and what they have to go through, and the pain, and actually it's only since Sheila's explicit self-portraits that it's become accepted that it's a turmoil rather than that it's just a phase in life. If you think of the way he's often painted himself, or Caravaggio, it wasn't in angst and turmoil like Sheila. And next one. This is Andy Warhol. This is what I'd say another type of self-portrait of many of his use of, if the value pattern is correct, it's still correct with all different colours and how many different selves there are. And a kind of a push on the self-portrait. This is Mark Quinn, his own a life mask in blood, of his own blood. And there's the story of it being in his of the builders turning off the turning off the fridge, turning off the electrics in his house, and him coming back to his life mask all over the floor as it all melted. So it's just how far the artists and self-portrait artists have pushed it. So there's a Renaissance quote which says that every painter paints himself, which is first documented in the early Renaissance. And if we go to this,
But do you think I should have cut out? Wait, I can talk. My mother will give me a proper analysis. Chiara, the camera is terrible.
If you find Poussin really boring, you can swap them for. There's a really nice self-portrait of Oswald Burley in the exhibition.
Oh, but I thought I'd put Poussin just to show that you have all.
But the Oswald Burley one's quite interesting because his features are in shadow and there's just light on the cheek, like the reverse of how you normally light these. So it's like they are. I'm always observing, not the one.
Oh yeah, okay, I'll look it up. Any other questions? Suggestions? Don't want to even. Suggestions. Yes, Scott.
I thought that the pug looked like broccoli shaved.
Which is obviously why it was, in my mind, ideal usually.
Have you done the self-portrait? You should put one of yours in.
Okay, but I have just done a really not very nice pastel. But I could put on.
I would do one in just at the end.
What, of me?
Yeah,
But I haven't done one.
This is my.
The bar is quite high, isn't it? We have to go over.
Yeah. We can don't you go attached to it. Burley.